Reporting from Arkham Asylum, this is Gotham Rogues. In this video we take a look at the Batman 66 episode, Diddle, Riddle, Smack in the Middle. I originally planned to wait with doing 66 videos until after I had finished the Batman movie villain series, but since Adam West sadly just passed away, I felt it was necessary to start now instead. It feels like the only meaningful way for me to honor the legacy of Adam West's Batman is to shine the spotlight on the show and talk about it. I also want to briefly fill you in on my own history with the show, as it may explain why I've been so hesitant to cover it on this channel in the first place. For some bizarre reason, the Batman TV show has very rarely been aired here in Sweden. As far as I know, only twice. It originally aired in the late 80s. Yeah, you heard that right. We didn't get it here until the 80s. This was before my time, as I was born in 1990, so I missed that run. Then we got it again in 2005 on a cable channel around the same time as Batman Begins came out in theaters. This was when I first saw it, and I was 15 years old. By then, I already had my own specific view of what Batman was, mainly influenced by the animated series and the Tim Burton movies. Needless to say, the 60s show didn't really impress me, as it wasn't my Batman. I haven't seen much of it since then, although I have watched the movie several times throughout the years, as I bought the DVD around the same time as the show aired. So anyway, sorry for that overlong introduction, but I felt it was necessary to explain. And now let's take a look at the episodes Diddle, Riddle, and Smack in the Middle, which together form a two-parter, like most of the episodes on the show did. These were actually the first episodes of the show, so this is how it all started, and how Batman became a legendary pop culture icon. In the episode, the Riddler attacks a Moldavian exhibit at Gotham City's World's Fair with an exploding cake, revealing a riddle that leads to his next crime. Commissioner Gordon contacts Batman and Robin, the dynamic duo, who solves the riddle and deduces that Riddler is planning a stick-up at the Peel Art Gallery. Once the heroes arrive there, they find Riddler in the middle of committing the crime, holding the curator at gunpoint and stealing a cross. Naturally, the duo attacks the dastardly fiend. However, they then realize that Riddler wasn't committing a crime at all. No siree. The gun was just a lighter, and the cross was his own, which he had lent to the gallery. Riddler then summons a brigade of lawyers and informs Batman that he's suing him for false arrest. Of course, it was all a setup to frame the heroes, but nevertheless, they must now quickly uncover the Riddler's fiendish plot before the case is brought to trial, or else the Caped Crusader will be forced to reveal his secret identity to the entire city. I had never seen this episode before, as the bulk of the episodes I saw back in 2005 were from season 2. I've gotta say, I found this episode to be absolutely hilarious, and this is a comedy, make no mistake about that. I suspect that the people who hate this show expected it to be at least somewhat serious, and no wonder they were let down. You can't come into this series with a mindset like that. You've gotta prepare yourself to the fact that this is a comedy show. If this was the only representation of Batman outside of comics, then I would have been devastated, but since it's release 50 years ago, by the way, we've had the animated series, the Burton movies, the Dark Knight trilogy, the Arkham games, so that's not a worry anymore. We can look back at this show and just enjoy it as one of many takes on the world of Batman, but I'm probably preaching to the choir here. Anyway, some people who hasn't seen the show yet know that it's humorous probably think it's because it's so dated that there's unintentional humor in it, but of course that isn't the case. In this episode we've got a scene where Batman waltzes into a club in full costume, all casual like, and orders a glass of orange juice at the bar. This was so hilarious I laughed out loud, but it gets even better. He talks to a girl at the bar, who's secretly working for Riddler by the way, and she asks him to dance, and he does. So there he is, the Batman, in full costume, dancing in the middle of a crowd in a club. You can't tell me that the creators of the show and the actors didn't know that this was absolutely absurd. Of course the comedy is intentional. Just look at Batman's dance too. Nobody could take that seriously, not even in 1966. By the way, I had no idea that the famous Bat dance was from the first episode. I assumed that came later in the series. But yeah, it was awesome to see. Another hilariously insane part is when Riddler's hench girl, who's named Molly by the way, disguises herself as Robin to fool Batman. She puts on a crudely made mask of Robin's face, and of course she looks exactly like Robin, because it is Burt Ward, just with her voice dubbed over his. So there is Burt Ward talking with a woman's voice and acting really feminine. This was another laugh out loud moment, and I couldn't even believe what I was seeing. This show is a fucking masterpiece. And like I said, it's not like The Room, which is an unintentional masterpiece. This is all done on purpose. Batman comics were pretty damn goofy and silly during the Silver Age, but they were never as crazy and comedic as this show. I mean, you never saw Batman dancing in a club and ordering orange juice in the comics. So I wouldn't really say that the TV series was a perfect adaptation of the source material. It really was its own thing, but it did take inspiration from the contemporary comics. As for the plot itself of this episode, it's nothing spectacular. It's basically just a standard Batman vs the Riddler story, but that's not a bad thing. It actually takes some parts from The Remarkable Ruse of the Riddler, a story published in Detective Comics 171, just 1 year before the show began to air. That was actually the character's first Silver Age appearance and third appearance overall, so it's interesting that the creators went with the Riddler as the first villain. He wasn't really one of Batman's top rogues at the time. In fact, he was pretty obscure, only having made 3 appearances. I would actually credit this show for popularizing the Riddler so much and pushing him up to the same level as Joker and Penguin. If it weren't for this series, I'm not entirely sure that Riddler would ever have become one of the main villains. As for the characterization of the character in this episode, I'd say it's pretty great. He's pulling off these big capers, but it isn't really the score that motivates him, but to prove himself smarter than Batman and Robin, just like in the comics. Like Robin says in the episode, the Riddler's mind is twisted. Crime's no fun to him unless it means outwitting us. So without the dynamic duo, or someone of equal intelligence, Riddler wouldn't even care about committing crimes. There'd be no point, as he'd have no opponent to outwit. Thus, he wouldn't be able to prove his superiority. That's a spot-on Riddler, and it's kind of funny that they got it right back in the mid-60s, yet often seems to have problems with adapting the character these days. There's one part I don't really like though, and that's at the end when Riddler sprays a crowded room with laughing gas, then tells a few silly jokes as the people pass out laughing. That's not part of Enigma's MO. That sounds like something Joker would do, obviously. If there's one thing I hate, it's when people say that Riddler is just a poor man's Joker, and stuff like this kind of feed that misconception. I can't forget to mention that Riddler is never named Edward Nygma in this episode. In fact, we never discover his true identity, and I don't think we ever did during the entire series. That's not really a problem though, as the character didn't get any origin story anyway, so he might as well be a total enigma. As for the performances, let's start with Adam West and Burt Ward, for this first episode at least. I love these two guys. West is all straight-faced and acts so serious, even in the face of all these absurdities, while Ward is all over-enthusiastic and cheerful. They really do make for a comedic and entertaining pair. There's an innocence to these two characters, and I guess the entire show, that's played up for laughs. I can't even imagine what went through Adam West's mind as they filmed the dancing scene and other equally absurd scenarios. And this was 1966. These days, actors are used to doing weird movies, but not really so much back then. The guy must have had one wonderful sense of humor to go along with the insanity of this show. So as for Frank Gorshin's Riddler, I think he does an absolutely fantastic job. He is a little bit too much of a cackling Looney Tune for my tastes. I prefer a more cool-headed Enigma, but that doesn't mean I think it's bad. You see, he doesn't do it the entire time. In fact, it's kind of as if this Riddler has 2 personalities, because he'll suddenly switch from a hysterical hyena to a dead serious, creepy psycho, complete with intense, staring eyes. I actually really like this, the contrast between the light-hearted goofster and the sinister, scary maniac. When Gorshin goes into his serious modes, you get the feeling that there's more to this character than what the silly plot is letting on. A darkness lurking just below the goofy surface. A seriously dangerous villain who's caught in this colorful, campy world. And just every now and then, his true persona creeps out. So while the character is written accurately to the comics, Gorshin's portrayal manages to also make this a unique version of the Riddler. It's kind of a win-win situation. I'd say that this is my favorite live-action portrayal of the Riddler. So in conclusion, this episode, the very first of the show, doesn't really feature an amazing plot, but the hilariously bizarre comedy bits and the wonderful performances makes it one really entertaining and fascinating piece of Batman and television history. Going forward with this series, I'm not sure if I want to review every single episode of the show, but I will however do them in chronological order, as opposed to jumping around like I do with my TAS and the Batman reviews. This means that next up on Batman 66 reviews, I'll be taking a look at Fine Feathered Finks, the Penguin's a Jinx, the Penguin's introduction on the show, so stay tuned for that. And as always, remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video. Or should I say, same rogue time, same rogue channel.